Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagan. We are back here in Studio 130 for another fun-filled, action-packed episode of the gold standard in Iowa conservative podcasts. The usual suspects today, John Hendrickson and myself, ready to thrill and excite you. So,
that's right.
John, do you know what that was at the outset? We had a cold open today.
No, I did not recognize
that is the sights and sounds, which will be sights for those of you that are on video, of the charter flight for the Greater Des Moines Partnership's Des Moines to D.C. trip.
Well, they sound like they're having fun.
Yes, it is the local government Central Iowa glitterati on their way to Washington, D.C. to share Des Moines with our national leaders.
I wasn't invited.
I'm sure they would take your money, though, if you wanted to. Maybe we should send you.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding, John. You want to go on that next year?
They probably wouldn't want me on
I don't know if they would either. You know what? I joke. It would be hard for me to join that crew of celebrating local governments. Look, I've got some friends on that flight. I got some folks that probably wouldn't give me the time of day on that flight. And much of what the partnership does is actually good. They're ambassadors for Central Iowa and a lot of the stuff that's going on here. It becomes a lot of local government folks celebrating themselves as much as anything else. But anyway, thought I would share that. So that's going on. It's a big deal for those involved, and I hope they're having fun.
Do the chambers still have their? I remember when I was involved in the chamber before I moved to the area, they used to have these regional days at the Capitol here in Des Moines. Do they still do that? I know they have. The Des Moines Partnership has a day at the Capitol. Okay. For example, Southeast Iowa days where they would have.
Yeah, they come up. They do that stuff. In fact, I used to go speak to some of those groups up there. And look, I joke, and obviously we have a certain skepticism of local government leaders that may or may not be well founded, but a lot of times they are trying. They're folks that are really active in their communities, and they're trying to bring visibility to what their issues might be. Great, that should absolutely happen. It seems like it veers off into please spend money on us, please fund our pork project, however valuable it might be. And that's where I get like, okay, guys, come on.
I remember the big push for, at least when I was involved, was higher tax credits, expanding tax credits. And
economic development incentives are always going to be big with your Chamber of Commerce types. I know that a lot of times road projects are really big to these folks. I remember the folks from Clinton would come up advocating for finishing U.S. Highway 30 between Cedar Rapids and Clinton. Fine. I think the DOT should manage when those projects happen, but whatever.
Yeah.
And it was Highway 20 getting that 4-lane across northwest Iowa. The Greater Des Moines Partnership right now is Highway 65, the bypass around the south and east side of Des Moines. They want to make that a federal interstate for a number of reasons, some funding, some, weight limits and whatnot. So, whatever. They all have their own individual needs, and maybe they should elevate them, but that's fine. Back here at home, I haven't noticed as much emphasis on No Mow May. That was a big thing. Do you remember that last year?
Yes,
to the
I
City
do.
Of Des Moines?
Yeah.
So speaking of local issues, they seem to have sort of let go on that, because at my house, it's 3 times a week Mow May.
Yes, yeah.
It is crazy out
there. With all
there.
the rain, yeah.
As soon as you get a break in the clouds, you got to get out and take it. So one of the reasons we haven't been on the yesterday we were going to podcast, and the lawnmowers were going outside here of Studio 130, and I didn't want to do that to our loyal listeners. So
now we have a fully functional and completed nice patio.
Yes, construction
once
is done.
The storms end, we
could.
Yeah.
I still think, John, sometime this summer, we need to figure out how. We need to go out there and podcast live from the from the patio.
Yeah.
So let's do that. Okay. So the I don't know if this is a regular segment here, John, but one of the things I want us to do today is pat ourselves on the back and talk about how awesome we've been lately.
Yeah.
But you certainly have been published a lot lately. And I know you've had some local Iowa newspaper pieces, and had a piece in National Review. So, I mean, give a rundown of what you've had. What of your stuff's been picked up lately in national media or local media?
The biggest one was national, and that was in National Review. And I believe it came out Monday morning, and it basically was highlighting the Iowa's acceleration of the flat tax, and so just talking a little bit about Iowa's really historic record on cutting income tax rates, and that's something that a lot of people nationally are very interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second one, which was not necessarily a policy issue, but the Des Moines Register ran an editorial about a week ago that was very critical of the governor. In fact, we talked
about that. Yeah, I seem to remember getting a little animated about it.
Yes, and actually, it was your thoughts that kind of stimulated my thinking to respond to it, because it was just so awful. I mean, and I know there's a philosophical disagreement between liberals and conservatives over what Iowa's doing, but what made me so upset about that Register editorial, and I felt like it needed to be responded to, was they inferred that there's some kind of a sinister agenda behind conservative policy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I just thought that was inappropriate. So I wrote a piece basically playing off of a campaign slogan that Calvin Coolidge ran on in 1924, and in fact I have a poster of that, and it says safe, sane, and steady, and that was a slogan that Coolidge used. And of course we're in a presidential election year now, and I think Governor Reynolds has had similar policies of they're safe, they're sane, and they're steady. And
John, you're at your best when you're hearkening back to 1920s presidential politics.
That's right. That's my favorite place to be, and because I think there's so much we can learn from that time period.
Yeah.
And I got some pushback on that article, because someone said, well, you were wrong about the conservative policies, but you're right about Calvin Coolidge, because Coolidge was a disaster and he caused the Depression, and that was just a comment made out of historical ignorance.
Yeah.
And that was someone that sent a note to me in response to that editorial, but it was just Coolidge was not responsible for the Depression, and that's
no. We could learn a lot of lessons in our contemporary politics from Calvin Coolidge.
Yes,
of a hands-off, smaller federal government. So absolutely. You had pieces in the Des Moines Register and the Waterloo Courier this week.
Yeah. One in the Waterloo Courier was published Saturday, and it was written by our friend Vance Ginn. It was co-written by myself and Vance Ginn. And
has been a guest on the podcast.
Yes, yeah. And so we were just highlighting kind of the fiscal 25 budget and some of the...
Well, and I think the point, and we have talked about this before, but probably bears repeating, is what's the takeaway on the state of Iowa's budget for fiscal year 25? And remind folks Vance's credentials on being able to speak to that.
Yes, he's a professional economist, but he also has tremendous experience in budgeting. He was the chief economist at the Office of Management and Budget, and basically
during the Trump administration
drafted one of Trump's budgets. I mean, for the federal government. Yeah, which is tremendous. And he also, unfortunately, Congress didn't do the recommendations. But Vance, I forget how much, but he found a large amount of savings to try to right size, start trying to bring some fiscal sanity back. Yeah, but that's just no easy task.
But the takeaway for the state of Iowa, then, so Vance and you work together on these things. What are the key takeaway or two on the state of Iowa's budget then?
Yeah, so the spending did go up about 4.7% more than last year, which was a little bit higher than we'd like to see, but it was still within the growth of population plus inflation, which is a metric that we use to think that state spending should kind of keep in line by, and so we just encourage the legislature to, as they move forward, to continue to be conservative in their budgeting, because that's very important. Yep. And so we think overall the governor and the legislature has done a fairly good job in that regard. Yep.
Anything else on any of those?
No.
Okay, no. I don't want to, because there's some good pieces, and we'll get them linked in the description here. on the podcast so folks can see that stuff. Okay. We have, I think, done a lot of the kind of digesting of the legislative session, and we're trying to kind of move on to some other issues. We'll continue to talk, look back at the legislative session. And some of these things are going to be local things, some statewide things, but just things with a fiscal impact that we want to try and highlight around the state of Iowa. And one thing that you and I have been talking about, John, and I don't even know that we mentioned this in pre-production this morning, but I'm reminded that I wanted to at least start the conversation. And here on the podcast, as we're having the conversation in the office, is there's been coverage lately of Iowa's Medicaid program, and how folks are being unenrolled or disenrolled or losing the coverage. And so we started to read on this and track. We're not healthcare policy experts, but it definitely has a significant impact on the state budget.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so Axios Des Moines yesterday linked to an analysis that nearly 250,000 Medicaid recipients last year were disenrolled 100% above projections. So, there's a variety of reasons for that, but the big chunk of that is folks just simply aren't eligible anymore, right? Yeah. They've gotten a job, they've gotten other insurance and don't need Medicaid anymore. Should we be lamenting that fact that a higher than expected number of people are actually getting private healthcare insurance?
Yeah, no, and this was something that was expected too, because the time the expiration came for the COVID extension no longer fit. And the other thing that I think the legislature has done is pass some reforms that try to tighten up the requirements and eligibility requirements, because one thing, Medicaid and a lot of these programs were meant to help those who truly need it. And I was just looking at the current estimates for the cost of Medicaid, and that's that and education are the leading drivers. But right now, the estimated cost for fiscal year 25 for Medicaid is about $2.3 billion.
And that is to the state of Iowa.
That's to the state of Iowa, yeah. And so actually it's a lot higher when you take in, because Medicaid is a shared federal state program. And roughly, I think these are the most current numbers. I got this from the Legislative Services Agency this morning. But as of November of 2023, and this is the briefing they gave to legislators this session, we had just 446, a little over 446,000 individuals enrolled in Medicaid in Iowa. A vast majority of those are children, followed by adults, elderly, and the disabled. Those are the people who generally qualify for Medicaid. And so the point of that is so of course I thought the Axios article was very slanted, making it sound like Iowa was just throwing these people off. But the purpose of Medicaid is to help those who truly need it. And so if someone gets private insurance, that's a good thing,
right?
So that it's not. It's kind of frustrating reading these stories, because the same thing was happening with when Governor Reynolds turned down the summer food program, the federal dollars for that. Right away, everyone just threw a fit, saying, "Oh, she's cold-hearted, and people are going to be starving." And there's so many programs, existing programs, dealing with that, with the food issue, and so I think the same thing applies to this. Is that one, it's tightening those roles and making sure that those who need it get it.
Well, that's right. I think underlying this, and you made the point here that the article was slanted, or at least presenting this that, oh no, there's fewer people getting Medicaid, that must be a bad thing. Or more people have been disenrolled than we thought, that must be a bad thing. There's a philosophical difference of opinion underlying that. You and I, and I think most fiscal conservatives would say, hey, getting folks off of a government payer healthcare system and into the private system, that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you and I would oppose a single payer healthcare system, which I think is why liberals, they're so excited about getting people onto Medicaid, Medicare, because they feel like the more people are on it, the closer we are to a single payer system.
Yeah.
And that any pullback from that must be bad, right? Now, and I think too, this idea, well, that maybe they just didn't fill out the paperwork or missed something. Maybe they just got insurance at work, and it's like, well, what's the point?
That's right.
I'm not going to monkey around with a bunch of paperwork to disenroll myself when I've got this at work. And let's not forget that our Medicaid carriers, through Medicaid privatization, they want to keep people in the system and are out there very willing to help with this paperwork. So the DHS spokesperson in the article makes the point that the majority, a large number of Iowans are back to work since the pandemic and no longer need or qualify for Medicaid. Well, I think that's absolutely true. And let's not forget, and you mentioned it, and I think that folks forget this, there were a lot of COVID-era policies that impacted our economy beyond just the spending.
Yes, yeah.
But, and this is one of them, is one of those COVID-era policies was someone that's on Medicaid cannot be kicked off for any reason. As long as this, and that lasted for years.
Yes, yep.
Until I think just a little over a year ago when that finally ended. But yeah, so you were continuing to fund Medicaid for folks that didn't even need Medicaid simply because that COVID era law was on the books.
Yeah.
Well, now we're getting out of that system.
Yeah.
And leaving it for the folks that really need it as that safety net.
That's right.
Of healthcare. So anyway, we, like I said, we don't spend a lot of time on healthcare policy, but it really, at a minimum, it's important when it impacts the state general fund budget, which is 20% of the state budget.
Yes, yeah. And just to give folks an idea, this is the total Medicaid and then the Iowa Health and Wellness Program expenditures for fiscal year 2023. So altogether, this is federal, state, and other funds. It's close to $7 billion.
The total?
Yeah. Yep. And so a little over $5 billion comes from the feds, over $2 billion for the state, and then a certain smaller amount from other funds. And the top institutions I get that are, of course, hospitals, nursing facilities, intermediate care facilities, and so on.
Yeah.
So.
If I know we've talked about it here, and I remember having this during my time in the legislature. Well, you need to cut spending. The state spends too much money. And we have been very, we've said a lot of good things about the legislature in restraining spending, but we had this conversation just recently, John, is that the discretionary part of the state general fund budget is a very small amount.
Yes. Yeah.
Most of what the vast majority of the state general fund budget is educating, primarily K-12 education, or medicating, which is the Medicaid and a few other programs, and incarceration, our prisons in the justice system. That's I think it's over 80% of it.
It is. Yeah. Yep. You're absolutely right.
Okay. If you are one that really wants to find real savings, or at least get really serious about future growth and spending, these are the kinds of drivers that you have to start looking at.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you can talk about, $100,000 appropriation to some sort of one-off project, but that really isn't moving the needle.
That's right.
So it's education.
Yep.
It is Medicaid, and we're not even suggesting that they should cut. But if our reforms at the state level and tightening up the system have led to this kind of savings, that should be seen as a good thing, not a bad thing.
Yeah. And let's, there's been a lot of states who have found through either their legislative auditor or an independent auditor tremendous amounts of fraud within Medicaid. And so it's very good for the state to have greater oversight in trying to tighten this up. And the other thing is Medicaid is not only complicated, but there are reforms that, if the state can do them, are good. For example, I know it's controversial, but the work requirements, and that has proven in states that have that it actually leads people out of poverty. But the other problem is sometimes you have to get the federal government permission to do those work requirements, and the current administration has been very hostile for states trying to do that.
Yeah. They would rather move towards more benefits for more people for fewer
yeah.
reasons, up to and including universal basic income.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
absolutely, yeah.
yeah.
And I think what you said was key. The goal of this is trying to push to a single payer system. I mean, that's their ultimate goal.
That has been underlying progressive politics for as long as I have paid attention.
Yeah,
is the underlying goal to get us to that.
I had a debate with someone the other day about Harry Truman, and they were saying, well, if Truman was alive today, he would be a Republican. I said, no, he wouldn't. I said he might be a hawkish Democrat, but Truman supported universal health care. He supported all these progressive legislation, and
they absolutely, make no mistake that Obamacare was the fallback position because they couldn't go much further.
Yeah,
it is a core belief that they want single payer socialized health care in a European or Canadian model, which delivers worse care.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that we still have the best health care in the world right here in America. Yeah. So anyway, didn't really mean to get that deep into healthcare policy, but it does matter. One other thing that I saw in the news this week, John, and I kind of circling back to some Des Moines stuff, and we're really not trying to be Des Moines centric here, other than, well, it is the state's largest city, and it is there's things that end up reverberating around the state. This isn't necessarily one of them, but we talked about DART, which is the bus service rapid transit Central Iowa, and it was a big, I don't know if it was a battle between the city and DART, which is run by different people from around the Des Moines metro area, but they're losing money and couldn't maintain their service levels, and asked City of Des Moines for a whole bunch of money to prop them up. And, well, ultimately, the City of Des Moines ended up giving them some money, but we still haven't seen is a plan from DART to make significant changes to what they're doing. So what was interesting this week is the City of Des Moines, who is propping them up with another short-term infusion of cash, has hired a third-party consulting firm to come in. Great, I think this is a good move. And trying to say, well, how can we do this? If DART won't come up with a plan to make themselves more sustainable, to borrow a word, what can be done? And so what this, one of the ideas that this consultant has done in other communities is to actually go towards outsourcing things to, shared van service and other things. I suspect that operating a van is significantly cheaper than operating a giant bus.
Yes, yeah.
But I think this is the kinds of creative solutions. I don't know whether that's the right answer for Central Iowa, but that's absolutely the kinds of things we should be doing to reimagine the delivery of these government services.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And you see school districts, for example, looking at different alternatives for transportation and even food service delivery. And
I really think that, especially in rural Iowa, you talk about rural school district transportation. I mean, by law, every kid can get a bus ride to school. Maybe there's a more efficient way to do it. I mean, maybe the folks out at the end of the line can come together and take turns, and everybody wins at the end. I don't know. But I get really interested when I see folks trying to find a better way to deliver those services, that ultimately some of them might work better both for the citizen and are more cost effective. We don't have to always continue doing things this way we always did them before. So, I mean, obviously on the DART thing, the pro-DART folks on the board were lamenting that, oh no, we're going to privatize the whole thing, and that how dare the City of Des Moines come in and hire this contract. I'm like, the City of Des Moines can hire whoever they want to come in and make recommendations. Yeah. I mean, good grief.
And the nature of bureaucracy, and just in general, is to try to survive and resist these type of reforms, because they're afraid that something's going to happen.
Well, I think I'll end with this, John, is that we kind of put a call out there to our listeners recently, is that if there are, and I think it was when Sarah was in here, if there are ideas, we want to hear about them, of what's going on. But I think specifically, I want to say that again, some of these reform ideas, like, don't assume that somebody else has already had the idea, and don't assume that there aren't folks that are interested in those reforms. So let us know. At the end of the day, it's what we are. We collect ideas and we research them, and if the ones that we think are achievable, we're gonna present those to policymakers. So we would love to have your ideas on ways to make government work better. So please contact us if you have anything like that. So anything else today, John?
I do have one.
Okay, you always do. Yes, you'd be disappointed me if you didn't.
That's right. Yeah, but I want to brag about you for a while because you spoke at Westside Conservative Breakfast Club.
Yeah, one of the big breakfast clubs in Iowa here in the West Suburbs.
And you spoke this Wednesday, and I just want to, I wish our viewers and listeners could have been there because you not only hit a home run with that, but you also summarized not only the great accomplishments that Iowa's gone through, but also kind of explain, why limited government and free markets are the best solution. And I especially would have liked most of our listeners to hear what you said about property taxes, because you just cut through everything and just, it said, here's the solution, here's the problem, here's how we can solve this. And I think people responded very well to that. And it would be, I wish more people could have heard your comments, because I think it was well done in terms of, what our organization represents and kind of the, why these policies are working for Iowa and what we can do going forward.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and I did not ask you to say that.
No,
I personally think that my biggest accomplishment of the morning was to be able to talk about tax policy before 8 a.m. with people eating, big, pancakes and eggs breakfast, and actually keep them interested for most of the hour. That is a challenge in and of itself, John. But no, I agree with that, and I think that it's important. You talked about why these things matter, and it's something that we should probably come back to often. And we can joke around that I just want more money in my pocket, which shouldn't even be a joke, because that is absolutely a worthwhile reason, because it's my money, and government shouldn't take any more of it than they absolutely need, which I think folks in the state of Iowa at the state level, our policymakers, have generally sort of accepted that we need to work on this. That's important because it's my money, and sort of from almost a moral standpoint, let me keep as much of it as I can. But the other part is, what are we doing with the state of Iowa to make it stronger?
Yeah.
And what is it going to look like in the future? And I believe, and I know you do as well, that we are putting Iowa on the path to being one of the shining lights of prosperity and opportunity across the whole country. And that we will be able to say to the rest of the country, look how it can work here in Iowa, and providing opportunities to our young people to be able to chase their dreams here, to start a business. There's no place in America I'd rather raise a family right now than Iowa. So those are the reasons why. Those are generational. Those are historical challenges that we're in this for. So I'm happy to have that conversation in front of any group anytime. So again, if you've got a group that wants to talk about tax policy, let us know. We'll see if we can't make something work.
No, I almost wish we had a transcript of your remarks to use that for a watchdog, because I think that was awesome.
There,
and I'm not just saying that either.
I know.
I just think you really spelled out kind of what I was doing right and how we can move forward, and what some of those solutions are, and why we're doing it.
Yeah, I still save my best work for the podcast, John.
That's right.
Okay, I want you to know that.
Yeah,
this is still what's important. But anyway, no, that those are kind words. So okay, well, that's all the time we have for today, folks. Thank you, John. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And with all of that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.